We're going to be talking about nursery for macadamia nut trees. It's a KISS. Keep it simple. My many years of working with macadamia nut, that's one thing I learned the most. Keep it simple. And if you keep it simple, it will work pretty good for you. And a lot of it is observation. Okay, picking the place. That's really important. You need a lot of sun and water. Water is very, very important with a nursery. You have to hook it up. You may think, oh, I live in Hilo, it rains all the time. Yeah, but it might be sunny that 2 weeks that you planted your seedlings and you lost everything. So water is very, very important. You got to have a place with water. And then protection from the element. Every nursery is different. In Ka'u, we had problems with wind. So we had to make sure that we had protection for the wind before you put it up, because once that wind blows, man. So we're working, as it says, nursery. So we're working with babies. Right. And we gotta remember they are babies. They take a lot of care and need a lot of care. So as it says, nursery, we're working with nursery. So it's very important that you have protection from the wind if you need any. The last one is a drainage. You might think, Mac nut does not like its roots wet. And making sure, like, you see how this one is a downhill? So they have the slope going down. When you have a rainy day, a lot of times you'll have a place where you put the nursery and you'll have spots where water will sit. That's not good. Make sure you have a good place where water can drain and your nursery is not in a water puddle. That's one of the most important. People think, we'll just put this nursery right here and it'll work. No. Number one, Mac nut doesn't like it's wet, always in the water. It doesn't. Okay? Macadamia nut replant or seedling stays in the nursery for 2 years. So you want to make sure you have good rooting system. So that's why we usually go with a longer bag. But you also got to remember, you're going to have to carry this out to the field when you do your replanting. I know Nursery Thing has, but you have to order with them and then they'll bring it in. But sometimes it takes time, so you always got to plan ahead when you're doing a nursery. Another thing is the soil, the compost. I love the husk. You know the husk we get from the macadamia nut? I like putting it on the side and letting it decompose, but that takes years. Do that. Any kind of compost you can, use that. That is one of the best soils, and you should always have soil. You need a lot of soil for nursery. The perfect mix would be 1/3 of cinder, 1/3 of compost, and 1/3 of dirt. But I've done it all with compost, and it works. But you have to make sure your compost is broken down. It has to be almost black. We call it the black gold. It has to be all the way down, because if it's not, what happens, it heats up. And you're going to do more harm to your nursery than you think. What it can do is burn. So you want to make sure that that compost is broken down. So a lot of times when you guys take in or have compost or whatever, make a corner. Keep it in there. That is your gold pile right there. You need that. Even after you start your nursery, you always need a little bit more dirt, always. When you replant, you need it. So make sure you have that. Setting up your rows. I like this style because it's 3 feet and then 2 rows in the middle. The reason I like it is that you can walk down the road. It's easy for graft. You can go both sides. Easy for when you do the cultivation and picking. But every place is different. What's comfortable for you? This is comfortable for me because I can have the workers go through, check them out. It's easy to take out when I want to take out. We start from usually the back and just work our way up on the rows. You're going to do a lot of cultivation work on your seedlings, so you have to put your hand in. And then when you're grafting, you also have to put your hand in and move around and take things out. So you don't want too much of that done, because if you hit it too much, you can stop the thing from setting or coming when it's grafted. Irrigation. Now, this is a drip irrigation. That's my favorite. I like drip irrigation because you're putting the water right on the roots, right where it's needed. Some people like the sprinkler irrigation. That works too, but I found that sometimes you don't get them all. When they're young and they're just sprouting out, they really need the water. So it's really important to make sure you get that water on. The drip irrigation, once you get it down, I think the most expensive is actually the irrigation hose. That hose stays on for 2 years. Then once you take off that stuff, that hose, actually, we cut it up and we used it for when we staked replants. So we keep using it. So we found uses for it. Planting. I'm used to using the 660s variety. If you guys know, there's different varieties. Nobody that I have ever worked with has ever done any research on macadamia nut rootstocks. I guess it never came up or never became a paper or whatever, but there was no information on that. The reason I was told they use 660s is the shell is thin, so it germinates fast, which is true. You get no problem with germinating with the 660s, and they come out fast, and usually they're smaller, so you don't really want them, so the 660s is not a problem, okay? So know what tree is your 660s. Usually we mark whatever, or what you can use whatever you want. Doesn't have to be 660s, but I preferred 660s. Once you pick those nuts on the ground, you husk them. And I would prefer hand husking, which isn't easy, but you husk them because you want the less beating up as it can be. Then you take a 5-gallon bucket, fill it up with water, put your nuts inside and soak it. Shake it up, soak it for a good 24 hours. Put your hand in there, stir it up, and a lot of floaters will come up. Those are your junks, so you throw that all out. So after you soak it for 24 hours, you got all that soaked up and you got all the floaters out. Then you set up a screen. Usually we set up on the side a little screen table. Throw your nuts on top of that, right? And let it dry. When it cracks, that's when you plant them. There's 2 different ways of planting them. This one way is a seed bed. You have to make sure the dirt is really clean, so you have to screen it. Because when you pull out the stuff, you don't want any rocks hanging onto it. You want it to come out really nice so you can replant it. So almost like coffee grinds you want it to get. So what we used to do is, take a screen. It can be a house screen or whatever, and just throw your dirt against that and get a nice fluffy dirt. Another way is direct plant, and I like that too. Less work. You take your cracked nuts and you put them in your pots. I usually used to put 3 per pot. That's the way you can get away with having a seed bed. But a lot of times you like the seed bed because they usually come out at the same time. So you can plant them straighter and nicer. But if you go both ways, can't lose. Okay? But it's really important that you screen that dirt before you put it. After you made your lines and you have your irrigation in, I usually wait a couple weeks before you plant. And the reason why we do that is we try to let all that dirt get that seed weed out. There's 2 ways you can clean that up. Gramoxone or hand weed. Okay? Do not use Roundup. Do not use Roundup anywhere near your nursery, okay? Keep Roundup away from your nursery, far away from your nursery. Always remember that. Even when you have your replants in the ground, no Roundup on your replants. That's a big mistake. It will stunt the growth really bad. And you'll see it. It just won't look good. It starts off with a yellow tinge, actually. And then, what do they call it? The colas, the new shoots will just frizzle up. And, yeah. And being that, like we said, it's a nursery, you want to start off with good stuff before you put out in your field. Because you're putting so much time in that you want really good stuff out in your field. So, yeah, stay away from Roundup. I'm getting to the point where I don't even like spraying it in the field. I don't know. It seems it gets into the tree. Yeah. I see it all the time, and it stays there too, and it's like accumulated. But that's for another talk. Fertilizing. I like Osmocote. 3 to 4 months of Osmocote. So it doesn't burn. I've been doing a lot of fertilizing with replanting and nursery seedlings, and they burn real easy. Real easy. I like the Osmocote. It's expensive. It can be up to like $75 to $100 a bag.
50 pounds?
Yes. But when you put that on the pot, you only put a tablespoon.
Wow.
Not much, just a tablespoon. You put it up after your seedlings have gone to about a month old. Then you put your first application. Okay? Then I usually put about a tablespoon on each pot, in each pot. Okay? I usually don't have to fertilize until after grafting again, and another tablespoon. Sometimes there's an exception. Something might have happened. You might have got a lot of rain and you lost some nutrients or whatever, and you'll see it in your trees, and you might have to fertilize more, but 2 times is usually what is all it takes. And you say, wow, but that's an expensive fertilizer. But I tell you, it makes a big difference. You don't have the burning. It's a slow release. It's what you need. It works. Weeding, hand is the best. I used to like to use the shell. I used to like that because I would be able to put my pots a little bit higher. So if they started rooting, they weren't rooting all the way down all the way yet, and I could be able to take them out. There was like a gap. So I like the shell. And you're using everything you have, but it's like now all of a sudden they discovered that the shell is so good with burning and creating energy for factories that now it's hard to get. So everybody's doing back to the mat. We need a single leader to go up. So you have to always check. If there's side leaders, suckers, you got to take them out. You're wasting energy. So you're constantly going in and out of your nursery. You should be walking it all the time, you know, at least once or twice a week or so. Get in there, get out what you got to get out, because it can go sideways on you real fast because you want that one leader going up and down. Do you guys all know what sign wood is? Okay, these are the tools you need. Ribbon, pen, and just a pipe. So what you usually do is you choose the variety that you want. 294, 660. I don't think people are grafting 660, 344s, 508s. Okay, I like if you can get the 3 to 5 year old tree to graft. I mean, to get sign wood, that's the best. But it's not always feasible. Yeah. But that's the best. What we used to like to do is the 3 to 5 year olds. We go and girdle them. We used to girdle the branches we knew that we were going to prune. Make sure you check out that tree. You know, you don't want to cut one of your main leaders. You never want to girdle your main leader. So we would go in there, take off the wood, at least an inch around, and then we would put a tape so we can mark it, and then we put the date when you did it. Okay? 294s, man, when we made the sign wood, it was ready in maybe 2 months. 508s, that takes a little bit longer sometimes. I don't know why, but it does. It took almost 4 to 5. So if you're thinking about that, okay, you're thinking, oh, I have some seedlings coming up. They're right about here. Then you better start making some sign wood, because if it takes 4 to 5 months. I've done 6. Yeah. What we're talking about is that when you girdle, what you're doing is you're cutting off the food to going down to the roots. You're making sure that that food that branch supplied you is staying up there. So you can use that branch for your grafting. So to check it, you got to use iodine. Okay? It usually takes 4 to 6 months for 508. 2 to 4. I mean, that was the only time I had any problems. I think it was a 508 takes longer. You mark your area, you do your girdling, and you have to check it, guys. A lot of people are like, I want to just leave them alone. I don't need. The reason why you got to check them, you got to knock off the flowers or the stuff. The nuts. No sense you guys girdle and all of that goes into the nut production and not into the branch. And that happens. A lot of people I notice don't do that. They forget about what they did for their grafting, and they forget to check. And you should be writing down where you put it, what the date is, and then you should be also putting it in a book somewhere where it is and how often you check. You should be checking it often, because if that seed or flower does go on, often it won't turn. What you do to check it is you cut a piece and you put some iodine on it, and it'll be dark, black almost, and you know it's ready. That's what you do before you cut it.
So when you're doing the iodine test, are you putting it on the girdled part?
No, you're putting it on a branch. You cut a small branch off the side, and then you'll see, it'll look like the veins, and you just put it on there, and then it'll just automatically, you'll see that. Okay.
And if it's bad, what will it look like instead of black?
It'll stay the color, same color, almost yellow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because the iodine, what it does is identify the starch. That's what the iodine is doing, is identifying if there's enough starch in there. And then you cut it. Make sure you know the top of the branch is. Some grafters make a, you'll not necessarily the grafter will cut it or whoever is, but a lot of times they'll cut it off and they'll have the branches and they'll be the same size and they're not sure where the top and the bottom is. And I've seen it. And they graft and it will take, but the leaf will go upside down for a little while, and then you're like,
It'll die.
Yeah, it'll die, but it'll take for a little while. You're like, oh, upside down. So sometimes what you do is when you cut it, you put a different cut on the bottom, or a sharp cut, or however, so that you guys are aware what is the bottom and what is the top. That's one of the biggest mistakes I've seen with grafting.
Can you get multiple scions from one girdle? Like if you girdle a kind of a fat branch, can you then get scions from, okay.
Yeah, it's not, usually you'll girdle a big branch and you'll have maybe about 5 or 6, maybe more than that up there. Yeah. We have to get our tools. This is another thing that we order is parafilm and rubber. I think Amazon. I think we did it all on Amazon. And usually I get about 5, well, depends on how much you got to graft, but they sell the rubbers by pounds, and this by box in cases, okay? And then you need a grafting tool, a knife, okay? One thing, because of everything we have, I would make sure, like, if you think you're going to be grafting, I would make sure you think about that earlier, about getting your parafilm and stuff like that, because sometimes it takes a little while to get here. Sometimes it took me a month to get my parafilm one time. And you get, oh my God, am I going to have enough? Oh, and you don't want to be that way, so I'll make sure you check on that. The main thing of grafting is getting that cut, that straight cut. Yeah. If you can get that straight cut, then you got everything pretty much down once. But that cut was real important. Start small. Get maybe a plane. Sometimes that knife is kind of intimidating, and I found that, so we used that. And we used a different tool too, a grafting tool. It was really weird. Eli had it. It was a wrench. Remember that, Nathan? We used that in Ka'u, and it worked pretty good too, because all they did was cut one side, and then you cut the other side, and you just match them. And it was just a wrench that did it. So what's so important about the grafting is making sure you have that clean cut, because when you put that thing in, it's got to, well, you got to match and you have to do some other stuff, but the cut is very important when you put it in. If you don't have that clean cut and put it in, it's not going to take.
to share this little tidbit that I don't want anybody else to do. We had these plants that we allowed to get too old. And when they got too old, I thought, wow, I'm gonna put them in a bigger pot and spend all this labor, and then we're gonna go get some bigger sign wood, and it did not work. Almost a complete failure. So you don't wanna try to graft trees when they're too old. It was a waste of time, and you just wanna start over and get the right age seedling to graft onto. So over here we have our fertilization tank. We got our 60,000 gallon water pond that we water the heck out of these plants with because they require lots of water. But a very simple fertigation method that we use, and we only use organic products mostly on the mac nuts as much as possible. Things like fish emulsion, seaweed cream, and chicken manure are the top 3 things that we use. We try not to mess around with too many chemical inputs on the mac nuts. They seem to like to grow slow and they like the organics. So we'll fill this halfway with water. I just got to switch around the pipes and make the water that's coming out of the pump go right into the tank for a little bit. So I'll fill it half with water, then I'll put the liquid inputs in there, then I'll put some more water in, turn it all up, then switch the pipes again, and it goes right out into the drippers. And it works really well, especially for something like fish emulsion that really mixes with the water really easily. So we do that about twice a month.